Hi everyone, hope you're having a wonderful week. Welcome back to our video this week. Super excited to be answering your questions. We had some good ones, so hope you check those out in the email below. I just wanted to talk with you a little bit today about the book of Ezra, or as it was originally called, Ezra and Nehemiah. In our Bibles, those books have been separated, but for the longest time, they were one single story, the story of Ezra and Nehemiah. In many ways, the book of Ezra and Nehemiah is the culmination of the Old Testament. They're not the last books in our Old Testaments, but they do tell the final stories before we enter into the New Testament. And in many ways, these two books are meant to heighten our expectations. Right? We've been talking about this the whole time. The Old Testament is kind of leading us to the Messiah by creating this longing inside of us. We read story after story after story of some people who get close to leading God's people to where they need to be, but no one is quite there. We get story after story of God's grace showing love to his people who just end up turning it away and pushing him away. And so over and over in these stories throughout the Old Testament, right, we have this longing. Oh my goodness, we see the need for a Savior, and we see that one has not come yet. We're waiting, we're hoping, we're longing for Jesus. And I think the books of Ezra and Nehemiah only increase that. We in a sense get three stories within the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. We get the story of Zerubbabel, who's the first leader we come across. It was his job to rebuild the temple. Then we get the story of Ezra, whose job was kind of to rebuild God's law amongst the people, who's going to teach God's people the law. And then we have the story of Nehemiah, who was going to rebuild the wall around the city. And each of those stories ends in a very anticlimactic way. What they were hoping for and working towards doesn't quite come to fruition. And I'll say some of those maybe for a future video, but we could talk about Zerubbabel's work in the temple first. Zerubbabel, he is successful in getting the temple going and laying the foundation of the temple. And at first, everything looks great, right? The temple had been destroyed, but now it's coming back. The people were living back in the land. Surely God's hand was upon this. The glory and the greatness of the city was going to be restored. But then we come to this passage in Ezra chapter 3. It says this in verse 12. But many of the older priests, as they looked at the temple and what was being built, many of the older priests, Levites, and family heads who had seen the first temple wept loudly when they saw the foundation of this temple. But many others shouted joyfully. The people could not distinguish the sound of joyful shouting from that of weeping, because the people were all shouting so loudly, and the sound was heard far away. So you had those who had seen the previous temple before they had been deported. Now that they're back, they see the new temple, and they think, oh my goodness, this one can't compare, right? It's nothing like Solomon's temple, right? Sure, we're trying hard, but it doesn't match. It doesn't even come close. Then you had people who hadn't seen the previous temple, and they're just happy, right? They're shouting joyfully because God is doing a new thing. And the sound of the crying and the weeping and the joyful crying, it's all mixed up. It's an anticlimactic moment, though. It's not as it could have been or as people thought should have been. The temple, it's just off, right? It's not like it was, surely. And again, we're going to see this theme repeated as Ezra and his work in teaching the people of the law doesn't quite work out the way that he wants it to. He finds out at the end of the book of Ezra that the people have been intermarrying, and he goes on a rampage. Even Nehemiah, his work doesn't accomplish what he hopes it will. And so we're left with this longing for Jesus. What a blessing it is to be able to read the Bible on this side of the cross, right? Because we know that longing has been met, that Jesus has come, that our deepest hopes and dreams and expectations are now ours in Jesus. And I hope that changes how we read the Old Testament. I hope that it creates and stirs in you the longing that it would have for its first readers, but I also hope that it reminds you of the amazing gift that we already have in Jesus. Jesus is the temple. He's the dwelling place of God, the one who came to live on this earth amongst us with all of God's glory. And he's here, and he's ours, and he is everything that we need. So I hope that you're blessed as you read these stories. Again, thanks for the great questions. Keep on sending them in. I love looking at them and giving a shot at answering them. God bless the rest of your week.